It's our community, and I am delighted you're here. Today's guest is a most interesting woman. Her name is Sandra Moran. She's an anthropologist and a faculty member here at Johnson County Community College. She's been a newspaper journalist, so she's had some background in writing. Yes, she doesn't spell thanks T-H-X like they do.
Oh, no.
And she has been an archaeological tour manager. I'd love to do that. And she has a lot of students in anthropology at the community college. But the thing that I find the most interesting about her is that she is an author. And she's just written a book. Actually, the second one, by the time I get around to it, you've written a second one. I might got to move faster. The first one is called Letters Never Sent. And here it is. And before I even begin, I would suggest to you that you get the book and read it. It's superb.
Thank you.
So there is an unsolicited testimonial.
Thank you very much.
And I think it is excellent. Now, having said that, I would have to say then that it's a very interesting book because of the subject matter too, but I don't want to pigeonhole this book. It is, and it's printed by a lesbian press.
It is.
Now, how did you, well, you had to get it printed. Could you have gotten printed otherwise?
Well, it's kind of an interesting story. My first book is, I actually had an agent, and they were shopping it around New York at some of the larger publishing houses. And I had Letters Never Sent, which I had also written, and I was interested in trying to get that published as well. And there was some concern that I would be pigeonholed as,
I don't want you to do that.
a lesbian author. And so I actually sent letters to several authors asking their opinion and trying to help me create.
How the devil do you get out of the pigeonhole?
Well, or how can I make an argument that I can write something that would be a crossover? And so in doing so, one of the authors that I spoke with asked if she could read the manuscript and then submitted it to her publisher. And that's
how you got it published.
That's how it got published.
Well, it is the story of, well, actually it's the story of a family. And within that family is a lesbian and her struggles to be who she is. And this is set in the 1930s. So in the 1930s, this wasn't the most popular game in town here. So acceptance is, and being able to live your life is not always possible.
No. One of the things that I was really interested in looking at were the cultural constructs of the 1920s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s. And you're right, it's the story of a family because you have this mother who was struggling with all of these gender roles of the 30s and 40s, and then you have her daughter in 1997 who finds herself, I would argue, struggling against the same cultural constructs.
Oh yeah.
Even though...
But the construct changes a little bit.
The construct changes.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure the societal expectation does.
Really?
Really.
See, I'm surprised at that because
in 97.
I
should
97.
say.
Well, but I would note that you had to say that no longer does there have to be a tragic ending if the person is a lesbian.
Okay.
I mean, you don't have to either kill her or do something awful.
And historically, that was the case.
You had to.
Yeah, you had to because people didn't want to see someone of that sexual orientation go on to lead a happy life.
Yeah. And actually, you know, it's something I don't understand because it seems to me, poor pilgrims stumbling their way through life here, that one's sexuality is not the most important thing you are or are not. I mean, who cares?
It's not. And I personally don't think that it's something that should define you.
I don't either, but seems to be sometimes it does.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about Letters Never Sent.
All right.
This is a story of a daughter who, after her mother dies, finds a packet of letters, and they are written to my darling A. Now, A was not her father.
No.
And so she assumes that it was a man. And as we uncover the story, we read the letters as it goes through and uncover the truth of this family, and everybody has secrets. And
Everyone
I think,
has
see, I
secrets.
think that's part of the book as well, is why I don't want to pigeonhole it, because everybody has secrets. I don't care who they are. Some of them are a little more serious than others, but nevertheless. But I think that it was an interesting touch that you made the letters "My Darling A," because to me that said, you know, gender has little to do with romantic love.
Exactly.
Doesn't make any difference who A is. She
And it
found
shouldn't.
love.
Exactly.
I found myself a voyeur in this book. I was on kind of on the outside looking in, and as I peeped through that window, it got more and more interesting as I talked to it. Your book switches back and forth from the daughter who comes to clean out her mother's things after her death to the mother and her life. How did you put that together? I thought that was really interesting. What hit you to do that way?
Well, one
I
of the
thought
things
was really
that I
cool.
did first was I looked at the parallels in their lives, and I am in love with the 1930s and 40s. I think it's
that's
just
good.
such a romantic era.
We're in good shape, you and I.
Yeah. I probably wouldn't think that had I had to live through it, but
It wasn't always so great.
no, but there's just such an air of romance to me, and I wanted to show that. But I also wanted to show that as Joan was discovering things about her mother, Kate in the past was discovering things about herself.
Okay.
And so I really wanted to juxtapose those realizations.
Well, you know, I would say this, that the 1940s, in my opinion, was something of an era of women, because for the first time women went to work.
Yes.
They went to work in the factories because the men were at war. And so it became Rosie the Riveter's time to shine. So in that sense, the book was placed perhaps in the right spot.
I did a tremendous amount of research while I was writing it, and I looked a lot at changes in gender roles for women, and I looked at the progressive era and where women really stepped onto the public stage for social change.
That's
And then you have the flappers. And one of the things that I found really interesting was that these women that were going to work, suddenly they didn't have the need for a man to provide for them, and so it completely changed the dynamic of their interaction with
It
men.
changed the dynamics of the family.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did.
The whole, yeah, it did. So
And
it was
then
an
when-
interesting period.
Absolutely. And then you hit the 30s, and you had the Depression, and
Well, everybody was scrambling.
everybody was scrambling. There were few jobs, and the ones that existed were for men.
Yeah.
And then the 40s,
Well, because women didn't go to work.
no,
So,
no, their job was in the home.
Bake cakes.
Yep. Well, yeah.
That's right. But I see this as a story of love and of passion and of loss and obligation. Those are your words. And I think that is what this book is. No matter who we are, what we are, or how we progress through our life, we all can relate to those 4 words.
Exactly, and I'm so glad that you said that, because one of the things I really want to do with my writing is to show this universality of,
Of human beings.
exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
we may experience things differently, but ultimately, when it comes down to it, these are the same emotions.
Yeah.
It's no different.
Well, I always think smart is smart.
Exactly.
Well, I also have to tell you that Sandra is very good at description. I am quoting here from page 44, and you're talking about the library. And Catherine is going into the library, and you describe the library, and I thought
In
it was...
Chicago.
Yeah, in Chicago. She pulled open the heavy bronze frame doors and stepped into the 3-story vaulted lobby. The white Carrara marble seemed to glow, and as usual she paused to take it all in. She closed her eyes and listened to the sounds of the building, the echoes of the footfalls, the murmurs of the lowered voices. Something about the building demanded respect. I thought that was a very powerful sentence. I like that.
Thank you.
She wished it was earlier in the day, so she'd go to the 4th floor reading room and sit at one of the leather-topped desks. See, and the book is full of those wonderful descriptive paragraphs, and I felt like I was there. I did.
Well, I actually went to Chicago, and I
To look at the library?
I walked the routes that the main characters would have walked. I went to the fairgrounds. I went to the library. I did a lot of research on what it would have looked like at the time and looked at a ridiculous number of archival photos.
Part of the book, as it begins to build up steam, as I always say, is coming to terms with who we are. We all have to come to terms with who we are in many different ways. But Catherine is beginning to come to terms with who she is and what she is not and what she is.
Exactly.
And she's fighting with it. Why would she, let's talk about that.
Okay.
The conflict within her soul over what she feels, what she thinks she must feel, and how she must act.
Well, if you were to think about the time period that, I mean, Kate was, she wanted things that she wasn't supposed to want.
Exactly.
She didn't want to stay in Big Springs, Kansas. She didn't want to marry a local boy. She wanted
That had
to,
been married to her two older sisters.
Oh, yeah.
The one she finally married.
Exactly,
Yes.
Clyde.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
She didn't want what was expected of her.
Yeah.
And so as she begins to discover who she is and what she wants, that completely contradicts how she was raised. I mean, she was raised in a small town in Kansas. The church was everything, family was everything, having children, and you know, the gender roles of a woman of that time. It was completely outside
it's
of.
tough.
Yeah, it was really
In a
tough.
word. Now, at this point, she has kissed Annie. And it says, it was amazing how one moment's indiscretion, a single minute, could change everything. In the blink of an eye, Catherine had lost a dear friend and begun to question everything she thought she knew about herself. She had always been different. She hadn't wanted to stay in Big Springs, and which is what she said. She hadn't wanted to marry. But the thing that struck me was, in a single minute, could change everything. And that's what happened to her. But sometimes that's happened to all of us, in a different situation perhaps, but happened to all of us.
Absolutely. And if you can point to that minute, if you can point to that second, you can see how everything fits together, I believe.
Oh, yeah. But I think retrospect enables you to do
Yes.
that better than at the moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I do. But I would suggest to you that this book is about how lives become tangled. Talk about that a little. That interested you. I know it did, or you wouldn't have written this book.
It did. I find how people are connected to each other a fascinating subject.
Oh, yeah.
And in terms of cultural anthropology in my classes, social media and technology has changed that. In fact, the book I'm working on now looks at how four strangers are connected to
I
each
got
other
to learn to
through.
read faster to keep up with all these books.
Yeah, but I think that if you take the time to stop, and if you take the time to learn about the people around you, you can't help but be
Tangled up.
tangled up.
You are. And I think the lives of others do become entangled with you, whether you want them to or not. I mean, not too many people are hermits and live in a cage or a cave or whatever.
Well, let's hope not.
Yeah. The relationship between Joan and Catherine, her mother, after her mother died, she comes to the realization that the mother that she thought she knew was someone else entirely.
And I think a lot of that stemmed from the circumstances of her conception.
Yes.
And in that regard, without giving anything
Yeah,
away.
I don't want to give too much of it away.
I know, it's hard because there's the
yeah.
opportunity for a lot of spoilers. I think that I did a lot of research on that sort of situation, and Kate's reaction is surprisingly not that uncommon.
Oh, I think. I didn't find it that way.
Yeah.
I mean, these are very, I know it may sound peculiar, but they're very ordinary people.
They are.
They're ordinary people who are caught in an extraordinary trap for their time. That's what I
One of the biggest compliments that I've had is that people will write me and they will say, this is my grandmother, this is my mother, this is my aunt, this is, I mean, they ask me, are these based on real people?
Well, I ask you that.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that I can't think of a better compliment than for people to think that they are real.
Well, they become real. This
They
book
do.
is good. I mean, I think.
Thank you.
I mean, I don't know what my opinion's worth, but I think it's
worth
good.
a lot.
Alcohol is rather visible in this book.
Yes, it is.
Why did you do that?
It was the end of Prohibition.
These ladies drink a lot.
They drink a lot and they smoke a lot too.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, I did a lot of research on cigarettes and lighters and how
What does
you
that
would.
sound? Cigarettes and tobacco, cigarettes and liquor and wild, wild women.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that was part of the story as well, in that they were exploring, all of these things that potentially were considered inappropriate or taboo. Premarital sex, drinking, smoking, lesbianism. So, yeah, they drink a lot, and alcohol does play a role in this, in this story.
Talk about the difficulty in Catherine's coming to terms with who she is.
Catherine was raised in a very strict religious household in a very small town, and even with the expectation that she was supposed to marry a man, and even though she had a couple of relationships,
With men.
with men,
Yes.
they didn't resonate. And I think there's a part of Catherine that may have known for quite some time
Well, I think she
her
did know.
attraction to
I
Annie,
think she
but
did know.
I don't think that she was willing to accept that.
No, she kept pushing her away.
She did. And Annie, for her part, she was relentless.
Yes, she was.
And
Yes, she was.
I find myself conflicted about that, quite honestly, because she was so relentless that I can see how that would push Kate farther and farther and farther back, but at the same time she was drawn to her. And I think that's one of the themes throughout the book, is that they cannot stay away from each other. I
And they did not.
No, and they didn't.
They didn't.
They didn't.
And but Catherine could not quite make that move to go and live with Annie.
She couldn't, even though she was given several opportunities to do that. And I think midway through the book, she recognizes the mistake that she made.
Oh yes.
But
In marrying Clyde.
yeah, but
Oh, yeah.
was
See, she
unable
went
to.
back home and did what her mother thought she ought to
Exactly.
do. Yeah.
Exactly. And again, at that time,
And a lot of us have done that.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
You know.
Absolutely. Reputation was paramount.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I see it as, and I think the two characters, Annie and Catherine, present themselves as the push and the pull of characters, of people that you meet one against the other. And each person makes decisions. We make decisions every 10 seconds. But those decisions many times affect others. And this push and pull, talk about that just a little bit, because that's a very tricky thing to write down. And well, I think it is, because I don't do that. But I think that's a very, and you did it really well.
Well, thank you. There again, it was just a case of these two characters were so intermeshed with each other and so connected, but at the same time we're coming at this from such different perspectives. And although ultimately I think they wanted the same thing, at the same time they were both unsure how to
get there,
to negotiate getting there.
That's
Exactly.
right.
Exactly.
Annie was not a good negotiator.
Annie was an awful negotiator.
Yeah,
Annie
yeah.
wanted what she wanted when she wanted it, and she was not a patient person.
No.
And Kate was terrified, and so
She was terrified.
Her
And the terror shows through that.
exactly, and her
their
default mode is
back
slow
up.
down, slow
Well,
down.
everybody's default mode is to back away.
Yeah.
And that's what she did. But while Clyde was in the Army, Catherine took a boarder.
She did take a boarder.
Yeah. And Annie came and lived with her, what, 2 years, wasn't it, while
Yeah.
Clyde was gone?
Yeah, and I think that probably more than anything was what gave Kate the real impetus to commit.
I do.
I don't think she was sure how to do it. I don't think she was willing to do it on Annie's timeline, but I think that's really what
I do.
what drove her
I do.
to I think she would have left Clyde.
I do. I do. I think that it's just like anything else, and I got to be really careful because I don't want to give this book away.
I know.
But Joan finds out a great deal about her mother from their next door neighbor, who was a good friend of her mother's, and rather of a confidant. So
Well,
she
really her only friend.
Yes, but the story of her mother's life is uncovered as we progress through the book through the neighbor who had promised her mother a silence, but relented because she knew she had to. It was only fair that this
It was only fair. You're absolutely right. I think that Joan really deserved to know.
I do.
On a couple of different levels. First,
I do.
First, because she didn't know who her mother was, and she didn't understand their
her mother wasn't
their
very motherly.
relationship.
Yeah.
No, her mother wasn't. Kate was not a warm person, and she early on, never wanted kids, never wanted to be maternal, and
Well, and Joan says someplace in this book, "My mother never wanted me."
no, and she didn't.
No, she didn't. No.
No.
Mrs. Yoakum, on the other hand, raised a very nice child.
Jason.
Yes.
Yes.
But you didn't bring Jason in very much. Why? Why? Because he passes through the story,
He does.
but very quickly. Was there some reason for that?
Not
I mean, he was kind of a nice kid.
He was a very nice kiss, and he was Joni's first
Yeah.
kiss.
Yes.
I've had a lot of questions. People asking
About Jason?
if Jason and Joan end up together. I don't know. They haven't let me know what happened with them, but
We'll have to think on that.
you have to think on it.
But Jason is 5 or 6 years younger than she is.
He is, but that's
Oh, who cares?
yeah, that's cool now.
Yes,
Look
it
at
is.
Demi Moore. Jason didn't strike me as really central to the story, and I have to
Well,
admit,
he isn't. But he came into the story.
He did.
Yeah.
He did, and he provided the opportunity for additional discussion. And,
Oh, yes.
and
Oh, he does. And he provides a lot of opportunity for
Yes.
additional discussion.
Yes, he
but
does.
we can't talk about it.
no, we can't. There's just so much that we can't because it's.
I have to tell you, this is such an interesting book. I want to know that, I'm wondering, now Sandra has written other things, and they're all kind of edgy. One is, the next one's on religion, and what's the other one? Attacking.
They're attacking. I prefer exploring.
Exploring, okay.
Relationships through social media, and then I have a fourth one that will be coming out in spring 2015, which is about a child rape and murder in the 1980s in a small town in the Midwest.
Well, relationships with the social media are like being friends with a robot. I mean,
Exactly.
I mean, to me, that's
It's-
just awful.
But it's
It is the way of the world.
inescapable.
It is
Yeah.
the way of the world. Do you believe that we will reach the point, and I want to go back to Letters Never Sent, we will reach the point where the genre of what we will call for a moment lesbian literature is defined as just fiction rather than lesbian fiction?
I hope so.
What do you see? That's what I'm asking, really.
I would like, I think with the changes in the cultural construct currently with gay marriage and coming more into the forefront and recognition of same-sex couples and civil unions, I would like to think that the literature specific to what we used to call lesbian fiction is going to mature as well. And I think
Have you
that-
seen it start to do that?
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think that we will see lesbian fiction becoming much more about lesbians
People.
as just part of the
As people.
Exactly, and interactions with the people around them, and the stories will, I think, deal less with lesbians specifically and much more so with just the human
People.
interaction.
People.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's where we make a big mistake, because you mentioned that there were 3 or 4 lesbian publishers. Well, I don't think we need those.
I would like to see the day where there's not necessarily lesbian fiction. It's just fiction that happens to include.
It's either good, bad, or indifferent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It just happens to include interesting people.
And you know, I always think, and you can comment at will, but I always think that people who are a little different are the most interesting people that I know. And the thing that makes them different is often the thing that makes them interesting. And they, because they're different, because they're who they are, really, they accomplish in life some delightful things. And they do. And I think that it's a shame that we have, I don't want to pigeonhole anybody or about anything. I mean, because we're, I remember the book Jonathan Livingston Seagull, where
Richard Bach, yes.
you know, we're free to fly. And that when we want to fly free, we want our children to fly free, and everybody would like to do that to some degree. And you know, the constraints of our life keep us from being exactly free flyers often. But I think that we can hit the mark in different situations. I do.
think so. I hope so.
I do. I hope so. So what kind of comments do you get about this book?
I have gotten really, really good reaction to it.
Good.
I have a lot of straight women that actually have read it for their book clubs, and
I'm going to suggest it. I am.
Thank you. The conversations that they have, because I will go to their book clubs often and discuss with them, and it's really not, the lesbianism is not an issue. What they find fascinating and interesting are the interplay and the characters.
But see, that brings me to a very important point, that in any good, solid book, the character development is all important.
Oh, absolutely.
See?
Absolutely.
And that's what makes this a good book. And I'm really sorry that we could not reveal every incident in the book. However, I would really suggest that you buy Letters Never Said, and they can buy it on Amazon or at Barnes and Noble. And I would suggest it. I think that, you know, you don't have to agree with everything you read, everything you see, but it does give you food for thought.
Thank you.
And that's what it is. And we need to always continue to grow. And I will be looking much forward to reading your next, what did you want to call it?
It's called Nudge.
Well, I know it's called Nudge, yes, but an exploration, that's what you told me, yes.
Yes, it's about an advertising executive that's commissioned by God to write a universal addendum to all of the world's religious texts and then market it.
You're not satisfied with this one, you got to do it again.
I'm not just happy with sex and drinking. I want to go after religion as well.
Go after religion, that's right. But you see, that's what interesting people do in this world. They cause us to think. And I would say to you, read the book and you will find out what's true, what isn't true, what happens to us by the decisions we make, and most interesting, how do we work out the problems that confront us? And sometimes we can, sometimes we can't, and sometimes we compromise. And I think that the characters in this book have done all of those things.
Thank you so much.
I just think I was fascinated.
I need to put you on the payroll.
Yeah, well, my bill is in the mail in the morning. But I took a whole Sunday. I read it all at once.
Thank you.
I thought it was just terrific. And I would say to you, aren't we fortunate that we have such interesting neighbors? And Johnson County Community College is very fortunate to have Sandra Moran on the faculty here to give her students a hard time digging in the dirt about old bones.
Absolutely.
So come and see us again. It was just such a nice time.
Thank you very
Sandra.
much.
Thank you. And thank you. It's our community after all.